Hello and a very warm welcome to the Analyst dated 6 June 2025 brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi, wherein we'll be covering the 7 set of current affairs issues which have featured in today's newspaper. The handout of this very discussion is available in the description below for your future reference. Beginning with the analysis section, firstly we'll be looking into the issue of left-wing extremism. We'll try to understand the causes and the steps taken by the government to address this issue. Moving on to the second topic, herein we'll be comprehensively analyzing India's relation with the 5 Central Asian countries. Moving on to the simplified section, herein we'll be covering the 5 set of current affairs issues in the most simple manner possible, and we'll also be doing the necessary value addition from the prelims perspective. So stay tuned. Beginning with the first topic, which is left-wing extremism. This particular topic you can relate with GS paper 3, basically linkages between development and spread of extremism. So what is the context? What has happened recently? Our security forces have killed Gautam, who was associated with a banned organization, that is Communist Party of India, Maoist. Now the first thing that we need to understand with respect to this particular context is, what is this left-wing extremism and from where it originated? So it originated from the Naxalbari movement, which took place in the state of West Bengal in 1967. So what has happened? The local landlords have bashed the peasants over some land dispute. So certain communist leaders, they mobilized the landless peasants like Charu Majumdar and all. They mobilized these landless peasants against the local landlords. And they mobilized the landless peasants to forcibly occupy the land from the local landlords. Why? Because they consider the landlords as the class enemies. Similarly, the Naxals also consider state to be as an oppressive state. Why? Because they think that the state is only concerned about the interest of the ruling elite and it is not at all concerned about the needs and the interest of the tribal population. So what is the objective of Naxals? So they are trying to throw away the legitimate Indian government through an armed rebellion and through mass mobilization. And in place of legitimate Indian government, what they are trying to put in place, they will be putting in place a communist state, okay, which would be empathetic towards the needs and demands of the tribal population. Currently, which all states are affected by this left-wing extremism? So these states, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Odisha, Maharashtra, West Bengal, MP, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, as you can see from this very picture as well, these states are currently being impacted by this left-wing extremism. We give the nomenclature to this region as Red Corridor. Now, let's dive deeper into the causes. Why this left-wing extremism, which started from a local land-related disputes between the landlords and the landless peasants, ultimately has turned out to be a big internal security issue. What are the causes for the same? So first and foremost, the land-light related disputes. What we are witnessing is, previously, these forest dwelling communities, they enjoyed the land ownership rights, okay? But after we came up with the Forest Rights Act, now these traditional forest dwelling communities, they have to give a documentary proof, okay, to prove that, okay, they were residing in this particular area for a longer period of time. And majority of the tribal population, they don't have the requisite documentary proof. And because of this, what we are witnessing is, more than 80% of the claims with regard to land ownership rights in the state of Karnataka were rejected till 2022. This is the data till 2022. So, since they are losing the land ownership rights, this is one of the major reasons why we are witnessing left-wing extremism. Then, this tribal region is usually rich in minerals, and that is the reason the companies, the MNCs are interested, okay, to carry out mining operations, to develop infrastructure projects here. And because of these development or infrastructure projects or mining operations, what we are witnessing, development-induced displacements of the tribals. And the sorry state of affair is, because of the development projects, there is displacement of the tribal population, but the state is not able to ensure effective rehabilitation of the tribal population. That is another reason of this left-wing extremism. Then, another concern is livelihood. So we have deprived them of the land ownership rights because of ineffective implementation of Forest Rights Act. Then because of mining operation, because of infrastructure development projects, in name of that, we are displacing the tribal population from their original forest area. So they cannot continue their traditional livelihood activities. And we are also not providing them any sort of skill development so that they can be effectively assimilated into the mainstream society. And to top up to that, there is corruption when it comes to PDS, or there is ineffective implementation of the PDS scheme. Okay, states like Bihar, states like MP, they are asking for other documentary proof apart from Aadhaar, that you have to come up with the caste certificate, you have to show the income certificate, you have to show the resident certificate. And as I told, these tribal populations, since they are not well literate, they don't have the requisite documentary proof. Okay, so they are not able to take the benefit of the PDS schemes also. So this is another concern. Then there is social exclusion. So tribal population, they have been made to work as a bonded labor. So whatever schemes or laws that we have come up with, for example, Scheduled Caste and Tribes Prevention of Atrocities Act, Protection of Civil Rights Act, despite enactment of these piece of legislation, there is poor implementation or ineffective implementation of this particular laws, and that is the reason we are still witnessing atrocities against the tribal population, and caste discrimination is still a harsh reality when it comes to the Indian society. And because of all these reasons, because of ineffective functioning of the local government, because of development-induced displacement, because of not getting their land ownership rights, okay, depriving them of the traditional livelihood practice that they used to do, they are witnessing disillusionment with the democracy. They believe, the tribal believes that this legitimate state is not going to take into consideration the needs and the demands of the tribal population. Okay, and this also get amplified. Why? Because there is poor infrastructure in this particular region, and that is the reason also Naxalites are able to spread false propaganda when it comes to the state. Okay, one major reason is ineffective working of the local government as well. So these are the major causes of left-wing extremism. Now, what all steps the government has taken in order to address this left-wing extremism? So we have focused upon modernizing our police forces. We are making security-related expenditure. Okay, we have come up with a scheme for that, wherein the government is spending for training the security forces. We are meeting the operational needs of the security forces. The government is also ensuring effective rehabilitation of the surrendered left-wing extremism cadres, okay, the people who have surrendered. Then we have fortified the police stations, okay. Previously, only 66 police stations were fortified. Now the number has increased to 612. Then we are also improving the intelligence framework as well. So the government is effectively spending on modernization of our police forces. Then we are also spending on skill development related schemes and the education related schemes, so that we can provide the tribal population with the necessary new age skill set so that they can be effectively assimilated into the mainstream society. So government has opened industrial training institutes, skill development centers, and we also have Eklavya model residential schools as well. Then the government has adopted Samadhan doctrine. So S stands for smart leadership. A stands for aggressive strategy with respect to the Naxals. M stands for motivation and training of our security forces so that they, are capable to effectively tackle this left-wing extremism. Then we are improving our intelligence framework. D refers to dashboard based on key performance indicators. H stands for harnessing the technology, okay, so that our security forces have the requisite technology and they can effectively tackle the tactics used by the Naxals. And A refers to action plan for each theatre, okay. And N stands for no access to financing when it comes to the Naxals. Then we have also improved the infrastructure. Here we have enhanced the road connectivity. Then the government has also come up with the aspirational district program, wherein the Ministry of Home Affairs have been given this task that it has to monitor the implementation of this aspirational district program in 35 left-wing extremism affected districts. What we are doing in this aspirational district program, so herein we are focusing upon convergence between the center and the state schemes. We are witnessing on collaboration between the central and the state officials, and we are also focusing upon competition. We are coming up with the Delta ranking. So under this program, the government would be basically focusing upon the low-hanging fruits, and accordingly we will make sure that that particular district is able to increase its performance when it comes to health and nutrition, education, etc. on these parameters. Then we are also improving the interface between the security forces and the people. We are trying to show the humane face of security forces to the local population, and for this we have come up with a civic action program as well. Through this we are basically trying to address this misinformation which the Naxals are spreading among the tribals, that the state is not going to take into consideration the needs and the aspirations of the tribal population. And we have also come up with the media outreach plan also to basically address this false propaganda. So we are coming up with tribal youth exchange program, radio jiggles, documentary and pamphlets to address this false propaganda which this Naxals are spreading among the tribal population. Now, what is the impact of what all steps the government has taken? We have witnessed significant reduction when it comes to the civilians killed in left-wing extremism related incidents. We have witnessed a reduction in the number of incidents also when it comes to left-wing extremism related incidents. The number of districts which were affected by left-wing extremism, we have witnessed a reduction in them also, and the incidents of violence have witnessed a 76% reduction when you compare the figures of 2010 and 2022. Now, the last thing that we need to know is what more needs to be done in order to effectively address this menace of left-wing extremism. So first and foremost, we need to bridge the trust deficit between the government and the tribal population, because what did I told you? These Naxals are going to rely on mass mobilization. They spread a false propaganda that the state is an oppressive state. It does not care about the needs and the aspiration of the tribal population. Okay, and the Naxals are trying to overthrow the legitimate government through mass mobilization and through an armed rebellion. So first of all, we need to bridge this trust deficit which is there between the state and the tribal population. And in this regard, we can take the help of the civil society organizations also, the NGOs also. Then we should make use of the new advanced technology like drones and all, so that the security forces could effectively target the Naxal related camps. Okay. Then we need to enhance the security forces capabilities. We need to provide them with the advanced weapons, etc. We need to strengthen the local governments. Why? Because I told you one of the reasons why the tribals are facing disillusionment with democracy, because of ineffective functioning of the local government. Okay, and West Bengal is a good example in this context. West Bengal has been able to reduce the left-wing extremism related incidents. Why? Because its local government is performing very well. So this is something which other states also need to evaluate. Moving further, the NHRC has pointed out that the security forces needs to uphold the human rights, because if they don't do so, this actually widens the trust deficit between the tribal population and the state. Okay, so security forces need to make sure that they uphold the human rights. Lastly, whatever infrastructure development project that we are coming up, that should be based on sustainability. Okay, we should collaborate with the tribals when it comes to effective management of the forest. We should actually make the tribals the local partners when it comes to development. And whatever the infrastructure development project or whatever project we are coming up, that should be on the sustainability lines. Okay, because we need to understand that one of the prominent reason of this left-wing extremism is Jal, Jungle and Jameen. Okay, so they don't want, the tribals do not want that their forest should be impacted because of this economic development thing. Okay, which is not based on sustainability principle. So we need to make sure that whatever project we are coming up, it is on the sustainability lines. That's all that we need to know with regard to this particular issue. I have framed a practice question for you. So do practice this question and let us know your answers in the comment section. With this, let's move on to the next topic. This next topic is related to India and Central Asia relation. This you can correlate with GS paper 2 topic, that is India and its neighborhood relation. So currently India is going to host the 4th edition of Central Asia Dialogue. Now the first thing that we need to understand is certain aspects with regard to the Central Asian region. Which countries we are talking about? So we are basically talking about these 5 countries, that is Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. If you look at the geography, this region Here we have Caspian Sea and here we have China. And in the south we have Iran and Afghanistan, and here we have Russia. So when I talk about Central Asian region, I am basically talking about these 5 countries. Now, how has been the relation between India and these 5 Central Asian nations? So historically, we had commercial relation with them because of the traditional old Silk Route, as you can see. It passes through the Central Asian nations, and we were culturally also connected with the Central Asian nations because of Buddhism. And after the disintegration of USSR in 1991, we were the first to establish diplomatic relations with the Central Asian republics in 1991-92. Now, why this region is significant for India? Because of its geographical location. Okay, it enables us to access the European nations because it is situated at the juncture of Asia and Europe. Then this region is rich in mineral resources like oil, coal, natural gas, and if you look at Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, they have huge uranium reserves. Then this region also have geopolitical significance. Why? Because in the last 2 decades, China has been increasing its influence when it comes to these Central Asian republics. And in order to counter the Chinese presence, we need to strengthen our relation with the Central Asian republics. Okay, because previously we have witnessed local protest when it comes to Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan. Okay, because of the Chinese projects not being based on sustainability principle, and they do not provide fair wages to the local people. Okay, so we need to take benefit of this. We need to go by the Mandal theory. Mandal theory says that your neighbor usually is your enemy and neighbor's neighbors is your friend. Like if you talk about India, Pakistan is our neighbor. So it is India's enemy. So that is why China is growing its proximity when it comes to Pakistan. It is strengthening its relation with Pakistan. And that is what India needs to do when it comes to Central Asian republics. We need to take benefit of the issues which are there between the Central Asian republics and the China. Then from security point of view also, this region is important. Why? Because we have witnessed Taliban control in the Afghanistan region, and if there is regional instability, this would be having security as well as economic repercussions for India. So that is the reason we need to collaborate with the Central Asian republics and we need to restore the regional stability. Then let's look into the areas of cooperation. So the Central Asian region is landlocked. So India is trying to strengthen its connectivity with the 5 Central Asian region with the help of International North-South Corridor, Chabahar Port and Ashgabat Agreement. Then we have planned Tapi gas pipeline, under which we have planned that natural gas would be transported from Turkmenistan to India via Afghanistan and Pakistan. But this pipeline could not be put in place because of lack of support from Pakistan. Then the Central Asian republics and India basically continue to have communication through these multilateral and bilateral forums like Shanghai Cooperation Organization and Conference on Interaction and Confidence Building Measures in India. Then we also have military engagement with these Central Asian republics. For example, we have annual joint military exercise Khanjar with Kyrgyzstan and Kazind with Kazakhstan. And Indian Air Force also operate one of the military air base in Tajikistan. So this shows that we have a strong military relation with the Central Asian republics. Then if you talk about the economic relation between India and 5 Central Asian republics, previously the trade volume, the value of trade was less than $500 million. But now it has increased to $2 billion. And what are the major items that India exports? So we export generic drugs, pharmaceutical, machineries, tea, etc. And we basically import the uranium and cotton. Now let's look into the challenges between India and Central Asian republics. First is limited connectivity. Because this region is landlocked, so we are able to establish connectivity through Afghanistan and Iran. So we are majorly dependent upon the connectivity projects like International North-South Transport Corridor, Chabahar Port, etc. But what we are witnessing, there are delays in completion of these projects. For example, we are witnessing delay when it comes to Chabahar-Zaheda railway link. And this is one of the reasons why we have limited trade relations with the Central Asian republics. Then, because of the Taliban's control of the Afghanistan, we are witnessing regional instability, and it could extend to Central Asian republics, and it could have security implications for India as well. And this is also one of the reasons why we are not able to strengthen our connectivity with the Central Asian region. Because in order to establish connectivity with the Central Asian republics, we need to go via Afghanistan or Iran. Then we are witnessing increased Chinese influence, especially in the past 2 decades, because the Central Asian republics are a major supporter of Belt and Road Initiative. And this can be validated through the trade volume between China and Central Asian republics. In 2023, the trade between the Central Asian countries and China was around $80 to $90 billion. And when it comes to India, we have discussed it is roughly $2 billion. So our trade volume is quite low, and major reason is basically lack of direct connectivity with this region. Lastly, because of the Indian foreign policy also, previously we were majorly concerned about how do we balance our relation with the major powers like USA, Russia, China. We had the first summit with the Central Asian republics in 2022. So it is recently that we started focusing upon this region, and that is also one of the reasons that we have not been able to strengthen our economic relation with the Central Asian republics. Now, what more needs to be done in order to strengthen the relation? So first and foremost, India should enter into strategic energy partnership, long-term partnership with respect to crude oil, uranium, natural gas, etc. This would enable India to realize the idea of energy security. Then we should make use of our soft power. We should strengthen the cultural links with the Central Asian republics. How we can do that? By establishing more and more Indian cultural centers in the Central Asian republics. Then we need to come together, and we need to cooperate when it comes to tackling the terrorism in the region. Then we need to counter the Chinese presence. How we can do this? By being guided by the principle of transparency, upholding the national sovereignty, and whatever infrastructure projects we are going to introduce in this particular region, that should be based on sustainable principle. Okay, that is what is lacking when it comes to Chinese projects which are done under Belt and Road Initiative. And that is how India would be able to provide a effective alternative to the Central Asian republics, by being guided by these principles. We can strengthen our economic ties. The two countries can collaborate when it comes to UPI, Aadhaar, DigiLocker. We need to strengthen the engagement between the banks and the financial sector. This is what the Honorable Union for External Minister has pointed out in this particular dialogue also. And the two countries can move forward when it comes to mutual settlement of trade in national currencies. This is how we can strengthen the economic relation between India as well as Central Asian republics. That's all that we need to know. I have framed a practice question for you people, so do practice this question and let us know your answers in the comment section. With this, let's move on to the simplified section. Now, beginning with the simplified section, an article has appeared in The Hindu, which is looking into the effectiveness of insolvency and bankruptcy code. This particular topic you can relate with the economy section when it comes to prelims. Now, insolvency and bankruptcy code, we enacted this in 2016. So it has been more than 8 years since we have enacted this particular code. And the recovery rate under this code has been over 32%. Now, why did we enacted this IBC code? Basically to introduce a time-bound resolution mechanism, because under this, the resolution needs to be completed within 330 days. Otherwise, we would be liquidating the company. That means we will be selling the assets of the company. So this has helped us in reducing the judicial delays, and it has also enabled the banks to recover the maximum amount of the loans that they have given to the corporate houses. Now, another question which the article is delving into is this code a preferred route for debt recovery? So the answer is yes. If you go by the RBI recent report, which it has released in December 2024, which is Trend and Progress of Banking in India. So according to this report, IBC is basically the dominant recovery route. Why? Because 48% of all the recoveries, when you talk about the banks in the financial year 2023-24, has been done by the IBC route only. And the banks have been able to recover more than 90% of the loans that they have given. And more than 1,000 cases have been settled through appeal, review and settlement. It has been an effective recovery mechanism. Why? Because it has made the companies, basically the one who have borrowed money from the financial institution, to adhere to the stipulated payment schedule. And because of this, what we are witnessing, a reduction in the NPAs also when you talk about the scheduled commercial banks. In 2018, the NPA of scheduled commercial banks was roughly around 11%, and in 2024, it has boiled down to 2 to 3%. So we have witnessed a reduction in gross NPAs as well. And we are also witnessing its positive impact when it comes to corporate governance also. What we are witnessing, an increased number of independent directors are included in the board of companies. Why? Because the companies need to make sure that they are working on a profitable basis and they are able to meet to their payment schedule. Okay, so that the resolution plan should not be prepared with respect to them. So the overall credit culture has also improved. But one challenge that we are witnessing is recently the Supreme Court, in its May 2025 verdict only, what it has done, the JSW Steel, it has made a bid to acquire Bhushan Power and Steel Limited. But the Supreme Court has rejected this and has ordered the liquidation of this particular company, that is Bhushan Power and Steel Limited. Why? Because this JSW Steel, which has made a bid to acquire the Bhushan Power and Steel Limited, was not complying with the resolution plan for 2 years. Even after the resolution plan was approved, then also this JSW was not adhering to the resolution plan. That is the reason the Supreme Court basically stopped this acquisition and it ordered the liquidation of Bhushan Power and Steel Limited. Now in this backdrop, India Rating and Research is pointing out that if this is going to happen, then in future the companies would not be incentivized to come and make a bid, okay, with regard to a company against whom the resolution process has been formally initiated. So this India Rating is basically pointing out that in future we need to strike a fine balance between judicial oversight and economic pragmatism. The article is pointing out that if India wants to realize its idea of $5 trillion economy, then we need to put in place a robust, predictable insolvency mechanism. And we also need to strengthen our tribunal infrastructure, and we should allow for pre-packaged insolvency process as well. Now, let's just note down certain pointers with regard to insolvency and bankruptcy code. So under this code, we have two kind of creditor. One is the financial creditor, basically the one who provide the money, basically your banks, NBFC, home buyers. Other one is your operational creditor, the people who provide services to that corporate house, basically the salaried employees or somebody who is providing raw materials to that corporate house. Okay, those people would be considered to be as operational creditors because they are helping in the operation of that particular corporate house. But one thing that you need to keep in mind is it is not the operational creditors who would be a part of committee of creditors. Okay, it is your financial creditors. Now, who is the adjudicating authority if this insolvency resolution process is initiated against an individual? So in that case, it would be your debt recovery tribunal, and it would also be the adjudicating authority in case this resolution process is against a partnership firm. But if it is against a corporate house, then it would be the National Company Law Tribunal. Now, what is the process? Now, if a corporate house have defaulted on a loan of around 1 crore, in that case, both the financial or operational creditor, they can initiate the resolution process. So this request would be going to adjudicating authority. Adjudicating authority would be having 14 days within which it has to decide that whether, give a green flag to this resolution process or no. If the adjudicating authority says, yes, we need to initiate formal resolution process against this corporate house, then an insolvency professional would be appointed who would be preparing a resolution plan. Okay, so in this resolution plan, we can do the restructuring of the loan, or we can, look in for other business partner which can collaborate with this particular X company, and that's how these two companies, through collaboration, they would be able to give back the loan which they have taken from their bank. Okay, now once the resolution plan is prepared by the insolvency professional, it would be placed before the committee of creditors. As I told you, it basically consists of financial creditors, banks and NBFCs, etc. Now, if 66% of the votes are given in favor of this resolution plan, then that resolution plan would be given a, go ahead. And if the committee of creditor is not able to take decision within 180 days, then the matter would be going to, again, National Company Law Tribunal, and then this National Company Law Tribunal can order the liquidation of the company. So this is corporate insolvency resolution process. What is this pre-package insolvency resolution process? This is something that we have in place with regard to MSMEs. And this is something that we introduced in the backdrop of COVID-19 pandemic. So what is this pre-package insolvency resolution process? So herein, the MSME firm and the creditors, they would be entering into an informal agreement with regard to the resolution plan, okay, without initiating the formal resolution process against this MSME, okay. And if that resolution plan is acceptable to the creditor, then that plan would be placed before the National Company Law Tribunal. And if it has been given a green flag by the creditor, it is approved by the National Company Law Tribunal also. It's like an out-of-court settlement kind of a thing, okay. So a formal insolvency resolution process would not be initiated against the MSME. What is the benefit of it? So the benefit is there is less delay, okay, because the debitors and the creditor, they are agreeing to a resolution plan, which is acceptable to both of them. And in that case, obviously, the banks would be able to recover the maximum amount of loan that they have given. Under this, we have Insolvency Bankruptcy Board of India, which basically regulate the insolvency professional agencies and the information utility. Information utilities are basically the one which basically keep the database with regard to the the debtors, the corporate houses, the individual who have taken loans from different banks. And insolvency professional agencies are the one which enroll and basically train the insolvency professionals. This BBI basically is the one which implements this insolvency and bankruptcy code, and it works under the administrative control of Ministry of Corporate Affairs. That's all that we need to know with regard to this topic. Let's move on to the next one. Now, a debate has appeared in The Hindu that should India amend its laws which regulate the nuclear energy sector or not. This particular topic you can relate again with the economy section, basically the energy part. Now, what are the two laws that the India is planning to amend? So first is the Atomic Energy Act of 1962. Currently, according to this act, it is only the state-owned companies like the National Thermal Power Corporation Limited which are allowed to regulate and open the nuclear plants, okay. So it is only the state-owned companies which have the ownership rights when it comes to nuclear plants. The private sectors are not allowed to operate the nuclear power plants when it comes to India. So India is planning to amend this act, and we are planning that we'll allow the private sector also to come and operate the nuclear power plants. So this is the change which the government is planning to bring when it comes to Atomic Energy Act. The another act which is the most contentious one, it is the Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act of 2010. So what is the contentious part when it comes to this particular act? It is the supplier liability clause. So keeping in mind the Bhopal gas tragedy, under this particular act, we have also made the suppliers of the material who are supplying the materials to the operators, okay, like these companies who are the operators of nuclear power plants. If foreign supplier, they are providing some sort of material to the operators, and if a nuclear damage happens, then in that case, supplier would also be held liable. They also need to provide some compensation to the victims of nuclear damage. And this would be the case if they have supplied defective material, or it is because of their substandard service that we witness a nuclear accident. Now, when it comes to the operator, the compensation that they have to provide to the victims of a nuclear accident is fixed. It is 1,500 crore. So what the government is planning, we are planning to fix the compensation limit when it comes to the suppliers also. Because currently, there is no limit till what amount the suppliers has to provide the compensation to the victims, like we have in case of operators. That is the reason the government is thinking of amending this particular act also. Why? Because since we have not fixed the compensation amount which needs to be provided by the supplier as we have in case of operator. So it makes the supplier vulnerable. The operators can ask an huge amount from the suppliers. That is the reason the foreign players like Hitachi, Westinghouse, Areva, they are not ready to provide the material when it comes to nuclear power plants when it comes to India because of the supplier liability clause. And one more issue which is there with this particular act is, the act is silent that who among the two, operator or the supplier, is going to bear the burden of scientific and effective management of the nuclear waste which is generated in case of a nuclear disaster, like what we witnessed in case of Chernobyl, okay, which took place in Ukraine. So the act is silent with respect to the same. This is also something which the government needs to look into. Another issue with this act is, ultimately the burden is on the taxpayer, because if the operators are paying the compensation to the victims of nuclear damage, ultimately this money is coming from the taxpayer money, because right now the operators are basically the state-owned companies. Okay, that is the reason we are talking that we should also allow the private players also to come and operate the nuclear power plants. Now, if you talk about the nuclear power plants which are there in India, I have put in place a picture for you. Just go through this particular map because you can get a question based on the location of the nuclear power plants. Okay. Now, let's look into the debate. So, the debate is whether we should amend these two laws or not, because India has made it its goal that India's nuclear energy capacity, we will be increasing it from current 8 gigawatts to 100 gigawatt by 2047. So, what one of the writer is saying, that this goal cannot be achieved because we have limited domestic capacity and this is not possible without investment from the foreign players. Okay, so that is why amendment is needed in order to get the foreign investment, and this would enable us to effectively utilize the US-India civil nuclear deal, okay, which we cracked in 2008. Because of the supply liability clause, the US suppliers are not ready to participate when it comes to the nuclear sector in India. Further, the writer is pointing out that this is one of the reasons why the Nuclear Power Corporation of India Limited also, which is one of the state-owned companies which operate the nuclear power plants, has to provide indemnity to the private suppliers also. That means if a nuclear damage happens, then the cost would not be borne by the private supplier. Ultimately, it is the NPCIL which would be bearing the cost. Okay, it would be providing the compensation to the victims, because if it does not do this, the private suppliers would not be providing you the material. Okay, so this is the reason this particular writer is favoring the amendments. Now, another writer, that is D. Raghunandanan, he is making a point that this whole discussion with regard to whether we should amend these two laws or not is based on two flawed assumptions. First is, we are not able to meet the goal when it comes to nuclear energy generation because of lack of investment and because the domestic player do not have that much of capacity, and that is why we need foreign participation. But Raghunandanan is pointing out that this capacity is not there with US, France, Britain as well as Japan. It is only the China which has the capacity to expand the nuclear power generation to the scale of 100 gigawatt. But Chinese players are not interested in investing in India when it comes to nuclear sector. So Raghunandanan is basically making a point that the government is planning to bring this amendment. Why? Because the American companies have issues with this Civil Liability for Nuclear Damage Act. And this Raghunandanan has also made a point that investment would be coming wherever the investors think that it would be profitable for them. And with respect to issue of liability, Raghunandanan has pointed out that you are planning to invest in India, but if a nuclear disaster happens, then you don't want to take the responsibility of that. This is not at all acceptable. Going further, the another question which has been discussed in this particular article is with respect to technology transfer. So in this respect, one of the writer is optimistic that yes, we will be getting the transfer of technology if we allow the foreign players to do the investment when it comes to the nuclear sector, and we allow the private sector also to operate the nuclear power plants. Okay, the writer is basically optimistic when it comes to small modular reactors. But the another writer is not optimistic because he is pointing out that we allowed FDI up till 100% in the defense sector. But then also we are not seeing the technology transfer when it comes to the defense sector. Okay. Another aspect that has been touched upon in this particular article is regarding the liability. So in this respect, the article has made reference to Convention on Supplementary Compensation. This convention, which is an international effort, is based on three key principles. Firstly, in case of a nuclear damage, all the liability has to be borne by the operator. Secondly, a pre-accident fund needs to be created, okay, so that we can adequately provide the compensation to the victims without any delay. And lastly, supplier would be held liable only in two instances. Firstly, if in the contract which the supplier and operator enter into, it was clearly mentioned that in case of a nuclear damage or in case of a nuclear accident, the supplier would have to bear the compensation cost, okay. And in another instance where the supplier could be held liable for a nuclear damages because of its willful misconduct, if because of willful misconduct we witness a nuclear disaster. In these two instances only, the supplier could be held liable. That is what is Convention on Supplementary Compensation. Now let's see whether the government would be bringing the necessary amendments in these two acts or not. With this, let's move on to the next topic. Now recently, the IMF Deputy Managing Director Geeta Gopinathan has pointed out that we are witnessing rapid uptake of the cryptocurrency, especially in the emerging economies, and the concerns with respect to the same. This particular topic, you can associate it with the economy section prelims. Now what concern Gopinathan has pointed out, one of the concern is because of rapid adoption of the cryptocurrency, what we can witness is substitution of the fiat currency. She has pointed out that because the people in the emerging economy, they are adopting the cryptocurrency, they might start using the cryptocurrencies only to carry out the exchange, okay. So the fiat currency which is issued by the government, that might be replaced. This comment has come in the backdrop of President Donald Trump trying to make America the crypto capital of the world, because the Trump administration is planning to pass the Genius Act. After the passage of this Genius Act, what would happen? The crypto companies would be allowed to produce more and more stable coins, but the crypto companies have to make sure that whatever actions they are doing, that is in compliance with the anti-money laundering provisions as well as anti-terrorism regulations, okay. That means they need to make sure that whatever stable coins they are issuing, that is not used for terror financing or it is not used for money laundering purpose. They have to make sure that the stable coins that they are going to issue, that should be linked with the US dollar on 1-to-1 ratio, and they have to maintain a separate reserve to basically back the stable coins. Now in this respect, what we need to understand is, what is this term stable coins? Stable coins basically are cryptocurrencies only, but here their value is tied to a fiat currency, maybe to a commodity, maybe gold, or to other cryptocurrency. So we have different types of stable coins, but you have to keep this thing in mind that the stable coins are those digital cryptocurrencies whose value is tied to something, maybe fiat currencies, maybe commodity like gold, or maybe other cryptocurrencies. These stable coins are considered to be better as compared to other crypto coins like bitcoins. Why? Because we do not witness much price volatility as we witness in case of bitcoins or other cryptocurrencies. So as I told you, we have three types of stable coins. One which is whose value is tied to a fiat currency, maybe US dollar or euro, like we have Tether, Gemini dollar, etc. Or its value could be tied to a commodity like gold. Example, we have Digix gold, or its value could be tied to a cryptocurrency like DAI. Okay, herein we witness again high price volatility. What are the other concerns with regard to stable coins? Now see, although in case of stable coins, if it is backed by a fiat currency like dollar, there would be less price volatility as compared to other cryptocurrencies like your Bitcoin. But if there is a fall in the value of the asset itself, then in that case, the value of stable coins would also be going down. Okay. Then there is lack of transparency and regulation, because at the international front, we don't have any uniform regulatory approach to basically regulate this stable coin. Okay, so these are basically the challenges with regard to the stable coins. That's all that we need to know. Let's move on to the next topic. Now, recently, the Comptroller and Auditor General of India is going to conduct the audit of Jal Jeevan Mission. This particular topic you can relate with the polity section. Now, why the CAG is going to carry out the audit of Jal Jeevan Mission right now? Because already 70 to 80% of the expenditure with respect to this mission has been done. This mission was launched in 2019. Okay, so first phase is completed by 2024. Jal Jeevan Mission basically is aiming to provide tap water connection to all the rural households by 2024. Okay. And the CAG is also planning to carry out the audit of Manrega also. And through this audit, we will get to know that why there is cost escalation when it comes to the implementation of Jal Jeevan Mission. CAG is also planning to carry out audit of other schemes like Rashtriya Uchtar Shiksha Abhiyan, Welfare of Building and Construction Workers, Green India Mission, etc. Let's note down certain prelim pointers with regard to this body CAG. So when you talk about the appointment, CAG is appointed by the President by warrant under his hand and seal. The salaries and other conditions of CAG are basically determined by a parliamentary law. And once a person ceases to be a CAG, that person would become ineligible for further employment at the central as well as at the state level also. And all the expenditure with respect to the office of CAG are charged upon the Consolidated Fund of India. That means they are not subject to annual vote of the parliament. It could only be discussed. Then Article 149 basically points out that when it comes to the duty and powers which is to be performed by the office of CAG, that would be determined by the parliament through a law. Article 150 basically talks about that how the accounts of union and the states needs to be maintained, and it should be maintained as the president says based on the advice of CAG. Then Article 151 talks about the reports of CAG. It says that the report of CAG relating to accounts of union shall be submitted to the president, and it would be the president who would be laying that report before the houses of parliament. Article 279 basically gives this power to the CAG that it has to certify the net proceeds of a tax. What is net proceeds? Net proceed basically implies what amount we have been able to collect when we have imposed a particular tax minus the cost of collection of that particular tax. Whatever is left, that is your net tax proceed, and this is to be determined by the CAG. Then as Parliament has basically enacted this Act, Comptroller and Auditor General of India Duties, Power and Condition of Service Act 1971, and based on this Act, the tenure of the office of CAG is 6 years or up to the age of 65 years, whatever is earlier. When it comes to the resignation, he or she can resign from his office by addressing the resignation letter to President. And when you talk about the removal, CAG can be removed in the same way as we remove the judge of a Supreme Court and on the same grounds. When you talk about the condition of service, his salary service condition is determined by the parliament, but it can't be varied to his disadvantage after his appointment. What is the difference between this office of CAG in India and in Britain? So in case of Britain, the CAG has both the power, that is of Comptroller as well as Auditor General. What do we mean by Comptroller? No money can be drawn from the public exchequer without the approval of the CAG when it comes to Britain. Now, when you talk about CAG in India, it is only performing the role of Auditor General. Okay, because here you don't need the approval of CAG to draw the money from the public exchequer. He only does the audit once the expenditure has been done. This is what is the difference between the office of CAG in case of India as well as Britain. That's all that we need to know with regard to this particular topic. Let's move on to the next one. Now, recently an assessment of the population of ungulates have been done on an all India level. This particular topic you can relate with the environment section in prelims. Now this assessment was done by whom? So it was done by National Tiger Conservation Authority and Wildlife Institute of India. And what we got to know based on this All India assessment with respect to population of ungulates, that it is declining in certain states, that is Odisha, Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh. But when you talk about the forest of Uttarakhand, Western Ghats, Central India, Northeast, there we have a fair population of ungulates. What are ungulates basically? So ungulates basically include your deer species like cheetal, sambar, pigs, antelopes and Indian bishan, which basically are the core prey base of the tiger population. Now, when you talk about the health of these ungulate population, the ungulates who are able to survive in diverse, habitats like the cheetal, like sambar, nilgai, gaur, we are witnessing healthy population when it comes to these ungulates. But the ungulate basically who can survive only in certain type of ecology, like your hog deer, which can live only in grasslands and floodplains, like your swamp deer, which requires a specific wetland, grassland kind of a ecosystem. We are witnessing a reduction in their population levels, mainly because of habitat, destruction, because of infrastructure development like linear infrastructure such as highway, railways, power line. So this leads to fragmentation of their habitat, and that is the reason we are witnessing a reduction in the population of ungulates. And what is the repercussion of this? Now, the tiger is basically dependent on these ungulates for food. Now, since we are witnessing a reduction in the population of ungulates, because of this, the tigers are basically attacking on the livestock, and due to this, we are witnessing man-animal conflict in certain states. Now, what we need to know from a prelims perspective, certain pointers with regard to NTCA. So, it is a statutory body which functions under Ministry of Environment. It was established in 2006 under which Act? Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. When you talk about its composition, so Minister in charge of Ministry of Environment is the chairperson. The Minister of State, when it comes to the Ministry of Environment, acts as the vice chairperson. We have 3 members of parliament also. We have 8 experts who have the qualification in wildlife conservation, welfare of tribals, etc. What are the major functions of this particular body? So it is the one which administers the Project Tiger. Let me know in the comment section when the Project Tiger was launched. And it also lays down the standards, guidelines for tiger conservation. We also need to know down certain prelim pointers with regard to Wildlife Institute of India. So it was established in 1982 and it is established in Dehradun in Uttarakhand. It is an autonomous institution. Again, it also functions under Ministry of Environment. What are the objectives? Basically, to build up the scientific knowledge on wildlife resources, train the personnel with respect to conservation and management of wildlife, carry out research, which would be enabling us to do effective management of the wildlife species, provide information and advice on specific wildlife management related issues, and it also collaborates with the international organization when it comes to wildlife research, management and training. That's all that we need to know from today's Analyst. Quiz would be coming right up next, so don't forget to practice the quiz and check your knowledge. Till then, keep smiling, keep learning. Have a very nice day all of you.